You can look south, I'll look north, all right? Okay. Where do you want it? Where would you like to stand?
We're all huddling.
We can all huddle together.
One big happy family.
We don't worry about it, Alan, too much. Ladies and gentlemen, do we have any members of City Council here otherwise? They're on their way. Let's presume they're on their way. President Diane and members of the Historical Society, residents of Thorold and friends, I welcome all of you to this short program, short because it is a cold day. The program here at the cairn at Allanburg, which was erected by the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada in 1924, on a grey and cold November the 29th, it was recorded, and the plaque, to dedicate the plaque, which has been redone a few years ago. It was also translated. There's a French version of the text of the plaque. That plaque was erected to mark the founding of the Welland Canal. And in the unveiling of that plaque in 1924, the Welland Canal was given national recognition. It is appropriate that we should gather here to commemorate a momentous event of 183 years ago, the turning of the first sod for the Welland Canal, which took place here, near this spot, on the 30th of November, 1824. This event should be recognized, commemorated, and celebrated every year, but especially this year, when we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the opening of the fourth Welland Canal, or the Welland Canal as we know it too, which opening ceremony was held on the 6th of August 1932. A moment ago I used the word momentous to describe the first sod turning here. We know who was here and what was said at that event because it is all recorded in the biography of William Hamilton Merritt that was compiled by his son Jedediah Prendergast and published in 1875.
Do you want him to hold that?
Oh no, it's fine.
Jedediah says
Do you want to hold?
that an interesting gathering of about 200 persons took place at a flat near the head of one of the branches of the 12 for the purpose of witnessing the important ceremony of turning the first sod of the Welland Canal. And William Hamilton Merritt stated that they, quote, had assembled for the purpose of removing the first earth from a canal which will, with the least and by the shortest distance, connect the greatest extent of inland waters in the whole world. And, as we say, the rest is history. I suggest that this first sod turning could also be called monumental in its significance and importance for Canada and North America, and indeed for the whole world. And so a beginning had been made here in 1824, and as we know, for every canal, just like the first step of the longest journey begins with the first shovelful of earth. William Hamilton Merritt and his associates were pleased. Merritt was equally pleased when the canal finally opened 5 years later, after much trouble and many delays, and way later than anticipated, at Port Toulouse on the 27th of November 1829, and the passage of the entire canal system by the Anne and Jane and the R.H. Boughton, which reached Buffalo and Lake Erie on the 2nd of December. This too was a momentous occasion. It was also a monumental event as well. It is good, ladies and gentlemen, that we have gathered here today at this historic spot to remember these anniversaries. I applaud the planners of this year's William Hamilton Merritt Day, which was held and celebrated last Monday at Block 7 of the present canal. These annual events, Mr. Mayor, should be held at a different site in each community along the Welland Canal corridor, and perhaps one day it could. No, it should be held here in Allanburg where it all began. Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased to have you here. I'd like to call on you for a few words.
Sure. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone here today. It's such a chilly day. It's hard to believe they actually had sod turning on this day 183 years ago. But we're glad they did, and we're, as a municipality and also as a region. I also want to thank the Thorold and Beaver Dams Historical Society for marking this day and putting this presentation together. I think it's very, very important that we recognize these events, especially to let our children know what has happened in the past. And we were quite pleased this past Monday. We had the William Hamilton Merit Day actually in Thorold, first time in Thorold ever, so that was great to see. And we liked, I sit on the Welland Canal Foundation, and I know they were spearheading that. They do want to see it in different communities because it's important to spread the message across all the communities, not just Thorold or St. Catharines, so it's good to see that happening. So on behalf of City Council, again, I thank everyone for coming out today, this very cold day, to spend a bit of time to learn a bit more about our history of Thorold and the Welland Canal. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Ray. This event would not be right or complete if we did not ask our Welland Canal researcher and historian extraordinaire, Alun Hughes, to come forward and to address the assembly. Alun?
Address the assembled.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, the assembled.
Give us your address.
It is darn cold today, so I won't be any longer than I should be. But it's appropriate that it's darn cold because I'm going to talk about the first ships going to the Welland Canal in 1829. And it was even worse than this when they came through. 1829, the Welland Canal Company was desperate to finish the canal. It had all sorts of problems, huge delays and all that sort of thing, and they were short of money. They needed to get a ship through the canal to cause their investors basically to pay up. So late in the season in November the 14th, they decided that they would open the Welland Canal on November the 24th. The Lieutenant Governor was invited. The 71st Regiment was supposed to bring their band from Fort George. Everything was organised for a great big celebration of the ships going through. Then the weather closed in, everything became bad, it became very, very cold. The canal was frozen and there were big storms and the directors couldn't get you from York. And so they decided regretfully they were going to have to cancel the opening of the canal and postpone it to the next spring in 1830. However, on November the 26th, the weather cleared briefly and William Hamilton Merritt, who was never one to miss a chance, decided to heck with this, we're going to open the canal anyway. There was one ship that had already arrived to go through the canal, the R.H. Borton from Youngstown, New York, and another one was on its way, the Anne and Jane from York. The Anne and Jane finally arrived at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 27th, and they embarked on their journey at 3 o'clock on that afternoon, which is pretty late in the day. So obviously they couldn't go too far before it became too dark. They continued for 3 hours altogether before they stopped for the night. By that time, the two boats were just north of the Lipster Mill, which is being renovated now in Meryton. Lock number 19 they just passed through. So in 3 hours they passed through 19 locks. They spent the night somewhere in that location. There was no Meryton at that time. There was an inn nearby, maybe just under construction. So I don't know what they did, stepped on board maybe, or whatever. The night of the 29th they stayed in the Meryton area. Then the following morning they climbed the escarpment into Thorold. And 2.5 hours later they reached George Kiefer's mill at the top of Front Street, the one that was demolished in the 1960s. They had a tour of the mill and they had a big celebration because they'd actually reached the upper level of the escarpment, and they'd done this in just 5.5 hours altogether of travel time, which is faster than a modern ship takes to go through the same distance. A modern ship going from Port Weller and out of Lock 7 takes about 6 to 7 hours to go 7 miles through 7 locks. These guys, in 1829, they took 5.5 hours to go 8.5 miles through 32 locks, for goodness sake. And they had to work the locks themselves, there were no lock tenders, and they had to work them by hand, and the boats had to be hauled through the canal by horses and by oxen. So it's an incredible achievement. So that morning, the 28th, they continued after touring the mill, they continued south through Thorold to Allanburg here. When they got to Allanburg, there were a couple of locks just up there on the first canal. They got stuck in one of those locks for several hours because a piece of wood got stuck in the paddle gate that let the water into the lock, in and out of the lock. So there's serious delays when they got to there. And that basically meant they couldn't travel much further on that particular day. And they stopped the second night here in Allanburg, just north of the bridge that would have been in this location at that particular time. The following morning, which would be the 29th, they continued from... I should have mentioned that the progress from Thorold to Allanburg here was very slow because of ice. They had to cut through 2 to 3 inches of ice, and so progress Up the escarpment, it'd be really fast, but once they got on top of the escarpment, it was really slow. And on the 29th, morning of the 29th, they continued south from here towards what at that time was called Beverley, which is now Port Robinson. They had to go through the deep cut, the big excavation, through the high land between the two. And again, there were huge delays because of the ice and because of lumber which had been left in the canal. They hadn't cleaned it properly and this sort of stuff. When they got to Port Robinson, they locked down to the level of the Welland River and probably got stuck on a couple of sandbars. And they were stuck there for quite a while and decided perhaps wisely they should stay the night at that point in Beverley. Where they stayed, I don't know. Whether there were any hotels there, I haven't got a clue at that particular time. But that evening, before they got to sleep, the American ship was attacked. It was attacked by a bunch of Irish labourers. I don't know why this is the case, but they did it. They drove the captain from the ship, they drove the crew from the ship as well, and it was only because of the intercession of a magistrate who happened to be on board that the situation was cleared up. Anyway, the following morning after that, which would be the morning of the 30th, they then went along the Welland River, because the canal at that point didn't go down to Port Colborne. They had to go out on the Welland River to the Niagara River and then down to Lake Erie. So the following morning they travelled along the Welland River to Chippewa, and again progress was very, very slow indeed. There was a strong headwind, it was blowing snow, and there was only a partially completed towpath, and a lot of the land alongside the river there was very marshy, so progress at Chippewa was very, very slow. Finally though, in the later part of the 30th, they arrived at Chippewa, and that was the official opening of the canal. They'd completed the transit from Port Dalhousie down to the Niagara River at Chippewa, and they'd taken 4 days in order to do it. And immediately somebody was sent back to St. Catharines by horse to announce, put it in the local newspaper, that the canal was now officially open. The journey was not finished, however, because as John mentioned, they carried on to Buffalo. They took 2 further days to get to Buffalo. They were towed down the Niagara River on the first day to what was called Palmer's Tavern, which is towards the bottom of Grand Island. And then the following morning, they went under their own sail. The winds had changed. They sailed across the river to the Black Rock Harbour, and finally onward to Buffalo. They were going to turn around immediately at Buffalo and come back, but they couldn't do this because the winds had changed, so they were forced to stay the night at Buffalo. What did they do? They went shopping. We know this because Jacob Kiefer, there were a number of passengers on board, okay, not just the crew and the captain and William Hamilton Merritt. A whole bunch of people went along for the ride, and one of them was Jacob Kiefer, who built the Welland Mills in Thorold. He was on the whole journey, and he went shopping on the Saturday night, I think it was, in Buffalo, and bought a blue soup tureen, which is at present in St. Catharines Historical Museum, because later on he donated it to the Merritt family and it ended up in the museum. It's all there apart from the ladle went missing, but heck, the tureen is there. I saw it the other day, it's quite impressive. And I'm sure the others went shopping as well. And then they came back the following day. The return journey was much faster. They did it in 2 days. The Anne and Jane went all the way back to Port Dalhousie. The RH boat, the American ship, decided to stay the winter in Meryton. They stopped at Centerville, which is an old name for Meryton, and that boat stayed there for the winter. And then nothing would have gone through the canal in 1829 after that, so sometime in 1830, then the canal was properly opened for shipping. Whether they ever held the official opening ceremony, I don't know. If they did, it was sometime in the spring of 1830. So that's the story of the first ships, the Anne and Jane RH Bolton, going through the Welland Canal. That's it.
Thank you, Alan.
You think the Irishmen rebelled because they hadn't been paid?
Could have been, yes. It doesn't say it in the newspaper why they did this. They did it.
What was the U.S. exchange rate on the?
Thank you, Alan. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are near the end of our program. At the sod turning, it is recorded that those gathered concluded the ceremony with 3 cheers. Can we do the same? Hip hooray! Hip hooray! Hip hooray! There. It is recorded too that the company adjourned to Badgerly's Inn, known as the Black Horse Inn, for many years, and to us old-timers of the present generation. They repaired to the inn, described in the Merritt biography as being highly pleased with the transactions of the day. We too are highly pleased with the transactions of this day, I think. We cannot go to Badgerly's Inn because it no longer stands, but we will stop at the Upper Stone House for some Christmas warmth. Merritt and his associates, 34 gentlemen in all, would have passed the upper house on their way to Badgley's Inn. And no doubt they would have noticed the fine-looking and imposing upper house, and some of them may even have commented that this would have been a grand place to stop for some refreshments and cheer. But they had to carry on because they had a reservation at Badgley's just up the road. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our program for today. I could say we'll see you all again, same time, same place next year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We will indeed repair to Uppers, to Bob's and Sharon's
Well, if
house.
you don't have any warmth, I better throw a log on the fire then.
All right.